Let me tell you about the winter. A stranger came up the mountain in a borrowed wagon and changed everything. This is a story, a tale of the old high country, the kind they used to tell by the fire when the wind was up and the coffee was hot and there was nowhere a body needed to be until morning. I have told it the way it was told to me. Sit with me a while, because this one is worth the telling all the way to the end. Years later, the people in the valley still argued about it. About the morning a United States Marshal rode into the high country with the cold sun behind him. About the cattle king who owned half the territory and believed he owned the rest. And about the woman they had called a bought thing, a purchased bride, a nobody from back east with one carpet bag and a steady chin. They argued because none of them saw it coming. None of them, least of all the man it happened to. Because before the marshal, before the reckoning, before a quiet woman laid a dead woman's ledger down before a judge and brought a powerful man to ruin with nothing but ink and patience and the truth, before all of it, there was only this: a grieving man, a failing ranch, a motherless boy, and a silence so deep it had teeth. The ranch was called Hawthorne Ridge, and it sat where the world ran out of easy ground, high in the Montana Territory in the autumn of 1874, in a fold of mountain that the snow found first and left last. A man had to want it to live there. A man had to be stubborn past all reason. Josiah Calder was that stubborn. Once. I was 42 years old that fall, built wide and worn like the timber he had felled with his own hands to raise the barn that still stood. His face was the kind the country carves, not ruined, shaped, cut by wind and sun and cold into something that looked permanent. His eyes were gray as creek ice, and they held the flat, patient look of a man who had stopped expecting anything from the days, except the work they demanded at dawn. The ranch ran on Briar Creek, clear water off the snowfield, sweet and cold, the kind of water other men prayed for. 60 head of cattle once, less now. The hands had gone one by one as the herd shrank and the owner's temper sharpened. The bunkhouse stood empty, the corral half full, and the house. The house had become a place where a man ate and slept and stared at a fire that warmed his body and nothing under it. He ate, standing at the counter, beans, salt pork, coffee strong enough to strip the paint off a wagon, because sitting at the table meant facing the second chair, and the second chair was empty, and the empty chair led to thoughts he had no use for. Her name had been Della. He had not said it out loud in 2 winters. She had hair the color of dark honey and a laugh that turned the horses' heads in the corral. She had come up the mountain with him when she was young and afraid, and she had loved the high country in a way he never quite understood. Stood the wildness of it, the bigness, the way the weather could kill you and take your breath both at once. She kept the ranch books in a careful, lovely hand. She read by the fire. She sang to the boy. And then one gray morning in October, 2 years gone, she had not come home. They found her below the creek crossing. The water was high. The rocks were slick. The sheriff stood by the bank with his hat in his hands and called it a fall. An accident. A terrible thing, the kind the mountains hand out without malice. Josiah had nodded, because what else was there to do? Except that Della Calder had crossed that creek 1,000 times. In flood and in ice, with a babe on her hip and a rifle on her back. She knew that water the way she knew her own hands. He never said that to the sheriff. He never said it to anyone. He only carried her things up the ladder to the barn loft. The curtains she had sewn, her dishes, the rocking chair she had hauled all the way from her mother's parlor, 1,000 miles on a wagon, because she would not leave it behind. He set them all in the loft, and he never climbed that ladder again. The house went quiet after that, the kind of quiet that fills a room like water fills a boot. There were 3 brothers at Hawthorne Ridge, though only one of them was dying inside. Gideon was the middle one, 34, lean, with a quick, gentle face and ink stains on his fingers more often than not. He could read and figure better than any man in the valley. He kept the books now since Della. He wrote the letters that the ranch had to write, and he watched his older brother turn to stone day after day, and it broke something in him that he could not name. Asa was the youngest, 19, all elbows and pride, with eyes that watched a man for the moment he would let you down. Because Asa had learned young that men you lean on can vanish. Their mother and father were a long time gone, and it was Josiah who had raised Asa near enough. Josiah who had taught him to sit a horse and read the weather and mend a fence. Josiah who was 23 years older and had been more father than brother. So Asa loved him the way you love a thing you are afraid of losing, which is to say badly and with his fists balled up. And then there was the boy. Toby Calder was 5 years old that autumn, Della's son, Josiah's son, dark-haired like his mother, with a way of looking at the world that was all wonder and no fear yet. He had a wooden horse, a small one, carved rough by hands that were not skilled at carving, and he carried it everywhere in his fist in his pocket, tucked under his chin at night. The horse had a name. Captain. Toby talked to Captain when he did not have anyone else to talk to, which in that silent house was often. He did not remember his mother, not really. He remembered a song maybe, a warmth, a shape in a doorway, the way a small child remembers heat after the fire has gone out. He called his father Pa, and his father loved him the way the dead love, from very far away, through glass. Now, down the mountain in the wide grass country where the ranching was easy and the men grew rich, there was Hollis Crane. Crane was 60 if he was a day silver and heavy and soft-spoken in the way of men who have never once been told no. He owned the Triple Bar, thousands of acres, hundreds of head, a house with real glass in every window, and a safe full of paper. He wanted Briar Creek. I had wanted it for years, because his easy grass country had one flaw the Lord had built into it. In a dry summer, the lowland creeks went to dust, and the cattle died for want of water, while the grass stood tall and useless around them. Whoever held the high ground held the snowmelt. Whoever held the snowmelt held the valley, and the high ground was Hawthorne Ridge. Crane had offered to buy it, years back. Della had been alive then. Josiah had said no. So Crane had waited. And men like Crane do not wait empty-handed. There had been a family downstream, the Dunmores. Good people, 3 children, a tidy claim on water that Crane decided he needed. Their fences had a way of falling in the night. Their stock had a way of straying onto Triple Bar grass and getting impounded for fines they could not pay. A loan was offered in a hard year, and the loan came due all at once, and the paper turned out to read differently than old Ephraim Dunmore had understood it to read. By the next spring, the Dunmores were gone, driven off their land with nothing, scratching out a hard scrabble, living somewhere down past the bend, and the creek they had held ran through Triple Bar grass. The valley saw it happen. The valley said nothing, because Hollis Crane was a generous man at church and a patient man in business, and you did not cross him twice. Remember the Dunmores. You will want them later. The wagon came up the mountain road on a gray afternoon in late October, and nobody at Hawthorne Ridge was expecting it. Josiah saw it first from the corral. A farm cart, not a proper wagon. Old canvas stretched over bent hoops. One tired mule. The whole thing moving slow and careful, the way a thing moves when it is carrying more weight than it was built for, and the driver knows it. He stood with his arms crossed and watched it come. And something in him went hard before it even reached the gate, because nothing good came up that road anymore. Nothing came up that road at all. The cart stopped, and a woman climbed down from the seat. She was young, 26 maybe, dark hair pulled back plain, a traveling coat gone thin at the elbows brushed clean all the same, boots worn but cared for. She stood a moment with one hand on the cartwheel, the way a person stands when their legs have forgotten what still ground feels like. And then she straightened, and she looked at the ranch, at the empty bunkhouse, at the gray house, at the big silent man crossing the yard toward her with thunder in his face. She did not flinch. That was the first thing Josiah Calder noticed about her, though he would not admit it for a long while. She looked at him like he was weather, something to be met, not feared. "Mr. Calder," she said. Her voice was clear and even. "I am Harriet Vance." A breath. "Hattie." He stopped a few feet off. "I do not know you." "No, sir." She reached into her coat, drew out a packet of letters tied with string soft and worn from handling. "But you wrote to me for the better part of a year," and she held them out. He did not take them. He looked at the string, at the careful folds, at his own name on the topmost page, in a hand that was familiar, but not his. "I never wrote a single word in my life that I did not have to," Josiah said, low, careful, "and I never wrote that." The wind moved through the yard. The mule put its head down and began hopefully to eat his fence grass. Hattie Vance's face did a small, terrible thing. The chin held, but behind the eyes, something fell a long way. "There has been a mistake," she said. "Quiet now." "There has," he said, which was the moment Gideon Calder came out of the barn, and stopped, and went the color of skimmed milk. Josiah turned. Slow. He had spent 2 years being slow about everything, but he had not forgotten how to read a guilty man. He had raised one. "Gideon," he said, and his brother could not meet his eyes. Here is what had happened, and Hattie did not learn the whole of it for a long time, and neither will you, not yet. But here is the shape of it. Gideon had watched his brother starve, not for food, for everything else. He had watched the boy talk to a wooden horse because no one talked to him. He had watched the herd shrink and the bank paper grow and the loft door stay shut. He had buried his sister-in-law, and then he had watched his brother get buried too, standing up, breathing dead all the same. So one night a year back, Gideon had taken pen and paper, and he had placed a notice in a matrimonial paper, back east, a respectable one. Brides for honest men of the territories. He had written it in his brother's name. Rancher, the notice said, 42, a widower with one young son, high country, hard work, honest, seeks a steady wife of good character. And then, because Gideon could not help the truth even when he was lying, he had added a line. A man slow to speak he has known grief. Whoever comes must abide long silences, must abide long silences. And a woman had answered, from 1,000 miles off, a school teacher with no people left and a courage that did not show on the outside. She had written back, and Gideon had answered as Josiah, and she had written again. And so it had gone all through a year. 2 strangers on paper, except one of the strangers was 3 people, and the lonely man at the heart of the letters did not know they existed. Gideon had meant to tell him. Of course he had. Every month he had meant to tell him, until the letter came that said she was coming, that she had sold what little she had and bought a passage west, and by then it was far, far too late. "You did this," Josiah said. He was not shouting. That was the worst of it. Hattie would learn that too in time. The Calder men did not shout when it mattered. "You wrote my name. You wrote to a woman. In my name. Josiah. You brought her up the mountain. To this." He flung a hand at the gray house, at the dead yard, at all of it. "I brought her up the mountain," Gideon said, and his voice cracked clean down the middle. "Because you are dying, and I cannot watch it any more." The silence after that was a living thing, and into it small and clear came a 4th voice. "Is she ours?" They all turned. Toby stood at the corner of the house, captain in his fist, looking up at the strange woman the way small children look at mountains, with wonder, not fear. Nobody answered him, so he tried again. "Patient, the way you explain a thing to grown people who are slow. Pa, the lady, is she ours or is she just visiting?" And Hattie Vance, who had come 1,000 miles to marry a man she had never met and learned in the space of 5 minutes that the man did not know her name, knelt down in the cold dirt of that yard level with a boy of 5 and said, "I am not sure yet, sweetheart. That is up to your pa." Toby considered this. "He does not talk much," Toby offered, helpfully, like a warning or a confession. "So I have heard," said Hattie, and the boy walked over and held up the wooden horse for her inspection, which was the highest honor he had to give in all the world. "This is Captain," he said. "He is brave." Hattie looked at the rough little horse with great seriousness. "I can see that," she said. "I have rarely seen a braver horse." Toby beamed like the sun coming over a ridge, and Josiah Calder, standing 4 feet away with his fists at his sides, felt something move in his chest that he had bricked up 2 years ago. A draft. A cold thread of air through a wall he had thought was solid. He hated it. He decided right then to send her back in the morning, except the mountain had other plans. That night the wind changed. Josiah knew it in his sleep, the way mountain men know things. The temperature dropped. The air went still, and then it did not. By the time the gray dawn came up, there was snow falling thick and silent and steady. The first true storm of the season 3 weeks early, and mean with it. He stood on the porch with his coffee and watched it come down, and he knew before he walked to the gate. The pass was the only way down, a narrow cut through the rock 8 miles off that closed when the snow came and did not open again until the spring thaw. It had taken men. It had taken stock. It did not negotiate. By noon it would be shut, which meant the woman in his bunkhouse was not going anywhere. Not in the morning, not for months, not until the snow let go of the mountain sometime past April if she lived that long. Hattie came out onto the porch behind him. She had wrapped herself in the thin coat. She looked at the white sky, at the falling snow, at the long, cold months written plain in it. She understood. He watched her understand. Well, she said. That was all. Well, he almost respected it. You will take the bunkhouse, he said. The words came out rougher than he meant. It is sound. There is a stove. Asa will lay a fire. And in the spring, in the spring, you go back where you came from. She nodded slowly, as if he had said something reasonable, as if he had not just told a homeless woman she could stay through the killing winter and then be thrown out into it. There is nothing to go back to, she said, not asking for pity, just laying the fact down between them the way you lay down a card. I sold it. There was not much, a house, a few books. The school let me go when the new master came, and a woman alone does not find another post easy. A pause. Your letters were the first kind thing anyone had written me in 3 years. Josiah looked at the snow. They were not my letters, he said. No. Something crossed her face. Not quite a smile. The memory of where one used to live. I am beginning to see that. And then she said the thing that he carried with him for a long while after. Your notice, she said. It said the woman who came must abide long silences. She looked back at the house, at the small face in the window watching them. Captain held up to the glass beside it. But there is a child in that house, Mr. Calder, and a child is never silent. Not really. Silence left this place a long time ago, I think. Somebody just forgot to tell you. He had no answer to that, so he gave none. He turned and went inside, and, behind him, for the first time in 2 years, the corner of his mouth did the thing he thought it had forgotten. Not a smile, but the place where one used to be. She braced herself for the worst those first days, because she was not a fool, and she had heard the stories. Women shipped west to men they did not know, the things that could wait for a woman at the end of that road. So she watched, and she waited, and she found something she had not let herself hope for. She expected a brute. She got a man who could not look her in the eye, who slept in the main house and gave her the bunkhouse, with a sound door and a bar she could drop from the inside. Who would have died? She came to understand, before he laid an unwilling hand on any living thing. She expected filth. She got a house that was clean in the way a tomb is clean. Empty, scrubbed, cared for, the way you care for a thing you have stopped loving. There was no warmth in it. But there was no cruelty either. And after the year she had had, the absence of cruelty felt like a kind of mercy. She expected a savage. She got a man who, when the boy woke screaming from a dream, was there in 3 strides, gathering him up, murmuring low and steady into his hair, rocking him on his feet because there was nothing in the house to rock him in. She watched that from the bunkhouse window by the light of a single candle, and something in her chest pulled tight, because a man who held his son like that was not a man without a heart. I was a man whose heart was so full of grief, there was no room left for anything else. And Hattie Vance, who had spent her whole life being the one nobody made room for, looked at that and thought very quietly, where no one could hear, I know exactly what that is. She had been the only one a long time herself. Her mother had died when Hattie was small of a fever, in a railroad town that did not remember either of them now. Her father had raised her on his own, a quiet bookkeeper, who kept other men's ledgers and taught his only girl the trade, because he had no son, and saw no reason a daughter could not add a column straight. He had taught her patience. He had taught her that a number cannot lie if you make it show you where it came from. And then he had died too, gone in his sleep over a desk of someone else's figures, and left her with a fine education, a careful hand, and nobody at all. She had taught school for 6 years. She had been good at it. And when the town hired a married man to take the post because a married man could be paid less and would not leave to wed, they had let her go with a month's wages and a letter of character. And she had learned all over again that the world has very little room in it for a woman with no one to stand behind her. So when a letter came, in a man's plain hand from the top of a far mountain, saying he was slow to speak and had known grief and needed a steady soul who could abide long silences, Hattie Vance had read it by lamplight in her cold rented room and felt something she had not felt in years. She had felt wanted. It did not matter now that the man had not written it. The wanting had been real to her, and she had crossed a continent to answer it. She cooked the first proper meal at sundown of the second day. She had cleaned the kitchen first, 2 hours of it, with an efficiency that came from years of cleaning other people's houses, other people's schools, other people's lives. She found the flour weevily but usable. She found the lard. She found a sack of dried apples. Crane's store had sold them at twice the honest price, and she set them to soak. And she made biscuits. The smell of them filled the kitchen. And then it did what smells do. It went under the doors. It drifted into rooms that had not smelled of anything but dust and cold and grief for 2 long years. It moved through that house like a ghost, like a memory, like a hand on a shoulder. She set the table, a plate, a fork, a cloth folded by the plate just so because beauty was not a luxury to her. It was a necessity wearing plain clothes. And she set 2 places. Then she looked at the second chair, the empty one, and without a word she understood it the way she understood most things in a single quiet breath. She moved the second setting to the head of the table and left the empty chair where it was pushed back a little, the way a chair sits when the one who used it has only stepped out for a moment and might any moment come back. Josiah came in from the cold, and he stopped in the doorway, because there was a fire going that he had not lit, and a smell in the air that undid him at the knees, and a place set at his table, the one he had been eating, standing beside for 2 years. Sit, Hattie said, not gentle, not hard, just sure, it is ready. And he sat. He could not have told you why. He had meant to send her back. He had meant a great many things, but there was a hot biscuit on a plate in front of him, golden, steaming, split and buttered, and he was so tired, and the chair was right there. So he sat. He picked up the biscuit. He bit into it. He chewed slow, and behind his gray eyes something shifted. Something deep down in the rock of him, frozen solid for 2 winters, cracked and ran just a little like the first melt off the high snow. He set the biscuit down. "These are acceptable," he said. Hattie Vance at the stove did not turn around, because she was a woman who had been married once to her own grief, and she knew the language of a man protecting himself with small words. "I will take acceptable," she said, "for now." And in the next room, unseen, a small boy whispered to a wooden horse that the lady could stay. "Captain, the lady could stay. Did you smell it?" She made the house smell like a place where people live. The days closed in after that, the way they do when the snow has the mountain. A rhythm came. Josiah did not agree to it. He simply could not find the strength to fight it. Hattie cooked 3 meals a day. and each one was better than a man had any right to expect at the top of the world in winter. Stews that warmed you from the spine out. Bread that made the kitchen a place worth coming in, from the cold to find. Pies from the dried apples rolled and crimped with hands that treated pastry the way a carpenter treats fine wood. She cleaned what had not been cleaned. She washed windows that had not been clear in 2 years, and the thin winter light came through them, changed softer and fell on the floor in pale gold squares where there had been only gray. She did all of it without asking, without waiting to be told. The way a person does a thing when nobody has ever done it for them, so they learn to do it for themselves, and then for everyone. And the boy was hers within a week. He followed her like a small shadow. He sat on a stool in the kitchen and told her the entire history of Captain, which was long and full of battles, and not one word of it true. She listened to every word. She asked questions. Was Captain born? Was he afraid in the war? Did he have a mother? That last one she should have seen coming. She did not. Toby thought about it, frowned at the wooden horse. He had one, the boy said, but she went away. Like mine. The kitchen got very quiet. Where did yours go? Hattie asked. Careful, so careful. To heaven, Toby said. Matter of fact, the way children say the largest things. By the creek. Pa does not like the creek. We do not go there. He turned the horse over in his hands. I do not remember her face. Is that bad? And Hattie Vance, who had buried her own mother at this boy's age and could not remember her face, either knelt down and gathered the child against her and said into his hair, No, baby, that is not bad. You remember her in here. She touched his small chest. That is where it counts. She did not cry. She had done her crying years back, into pillows alone, the way she did everything. But that night she sat a long time in the dark of the bunkhouse, and she thought about a man who would not go near the creek where his wife had died, and a sheriff who had called it a fall. And she thought the way a tidy mind cannot help but think that was a strange place for a woman who knew that water to drown. She filed it away. She did not know yet what she had filed. The wary one was the youngest, Asa. I did not trust her, and he was right not to, by his own lights, because 19 years had taught him that good things came up the mountain to be taken away again. He did his chores. He spoke to her when he had to, and he watched her with hard, dark eyes, waiting for the moment she would prove to be exactly what he feared. Josiah was harder to read, and harder still, but the ledger was where it began. Hattie found the ranch books a week, and while looking for paper to write the boy his letters on, 2 ledgers, one in a careful, lovely dead woman's hand, ending abruptly 2 Octobers back, and one taken up after in Gideon's cramped figuring doing his honest best. She read a column of figures the way other women read a face, and the figures at Hawthorne Ridge did not add up. There was a loan from the Triple Bar, from Hollis Crane, taken in a hard, dry summer when the creek ran low and the herd sickened and the hands still had to be paid. Della had been alive then. She had kept the books that year the way she kept them every year in her fine, careful hand. It was a loan like any other, honest paper on its face, the loan she understood. Hard years happen. It was the interest she did not understand. The way it grew, the numbers were wrong, not by a little, by a pattern. There were charges entered that had no name, fees that referred to other pages and the other pages were not there. Impound fines for cattle that had wandered season after season, more cattle than the little herd had ever owned. And there was a figure at the bottom, the sum the ranch was said to owe come spring. That was nearly twice what the honest arithmetic gave her when she did it herself. 3 times by candlelight, sure, she had erred. She had not erred. She sat with the ledger open and the candle low, and a cold feeling in her stomach that had nothing to do with the winter. Somebody was cooking these books. Slow, patient, a little more every season in a household too sunk in grief to look. And whoever it was meant to own Hawthorne Ridge by spring. She did not say anything. Not yet. Because she was a stranger here and a woman, and the man of the house had told her she was leaving when the snow let go. Who would listen to her? Whoever had. So she closed the ledger, and she watched, and she waited. But she had begun, without meaning to pull a thread. And the thing about a thread is this: once you have it in your fingers, you cannot help but pull. And some things are sewn together with thread that once pulled takes the whole garment with it. The storm that mattered came in February. It came the way the bad ones come. Quiet, first. A stillness. A yellow light along the underside of the clouds that the old hands hated. Josiah read it off the sky at noon and brought the stock in close and told them all to stay near the house. He told the boy, too. Stay in, Toby. Stay where I can see you. But the boy was 5, and the chickens were his job, the few they had, and one of the hens had gone broody and hidden herself. And Toby loved that hen, and the snow had not started yet, when he slipped out the kitchen door, to find her with Captain in his pocket for courage. By the time anyone missed him, the world had gone white. It happened the way the worst things happen. Fast, and then all at once. Hattie turned from the stove to ask the boy to fetch water, and the boy was not there. The door was open an inch. Snow was coming through it sideways. And the yard beyond was a roaring white nothing, where you could not see your own hand at the end of your own arm. Toby! Her voice came out wrong, small, then large. Toby. Josiah was across the room before the name finished. He had the door open. The cold came in like a struck blow. He went for the hen. Hattie was already pulling on the boy's spare coat over her own, jamming her feet into boots. The coop! He will have gone to the coop. Stay in the house. No. Hattie, he does not know me well enough to come to a stranger's voice, she said fast, fierce, hauling a length of rope off the wall peg the way she had seen Asa do it. But he will come to 2 voices over one. We tie off to the porch post and we sweep. You go right, I go left. We do not let go of the rope. Now, Josiah, we go now. He looked at her for 1/2 of 1 second. A woman he had known 4 months on paper and 4 days in the flesh. A woman he had meant to send back down the mountain. Standing in his dead wife's son's coat with a rope in her hands and no fear in her face, telling him how to save his boy. You, let go of that rope, he said. I will not be able to find you either. Then I will not let go. They went out into the white. I will not tell you. It was easy. It was not. The cold out there was the kind that means it. It found every gap in the wool. It stole the breath out of your chest and the feeling out of your fingers, and it lied to you the way that cold lies whispering that you could rest just for a moment, just lie down, just close your eyes. They swept the yard on the rope. Josiah right, Hattie left, calling. The wind tore the names out of their mouths and threw them away. It was Hattie who found the coop, and Hattie who found it empty, the broody hen gone, the small boot prints already filling, leading not back to the house, but off away toward the one place a frightened child should never have gone, toward the creek. She understood it in a flash of horror. He had not been able to find the house. He had gotten turned around, and he had followed the only landmark he knew in the white, the sound of water, the creek that his pa would not go near, the creek that had taken his mother. "Josiah!" She hauled on the rope, 3 hard pulls, the signal Asa had taught her, without knowing why she would need it. The creek. He went toward the water, and she heard through the roar, a sound she had never heard from Josiah Calder. She heard him cry out, not a word, a sound, the sound a man makes when the wound he has been carrying for 2 years is torn open all at once. Because he knew that creek. He knew what that water did to the things it took. They went together then. The rope ran out and he tied his belt to it and then her shawl, and they crawled the last of it on their hands and knees beneath the worst of the wind, following the sound of water, and a smaller sound under it. A thin, high sound. A child crying for a mother he could not remember. Josiah reached him first. Toby was at the edge of the bank, soaked to the knee, where he had broken through the ice at the margin, white-lipped, shaking, past crying now into the quiet that is the dangerous part, the cold's last lie. Captain clutched in one blue fist. His father picked him up off the snow and crushed him to his chest, and made that sound again, low now broken over and over into the boy's frozen hair, and Hattie could not hear the words, but she did not need to. He was saying a name. I was saying, I have got you. I have got you. I will not let the water have you too. And then, raw ragged, torn up from somewhere, 2 years deep, she heard him say the other name, the one he had not spoken aloud in all that time. He said, Della, I am sorry. I could not save you, but I have got our boy. They got back along the rope hand over hand. They got the boy inside. They stripped the frozen clothes and wrapped him by the fire, and Hattie heated water, and Josiah held his son against his own warmth under the blankets, sharing the heat of his body. The only way the country knew, and slowly, slowly the blue went out of the small lips, and the shaking turned to shivering, turned to sleep, real sleep, breathing sleep, alive. Asa stood white-faced in the doorway. Gideon prayed out loud and did not care who heard him. And Hattie Vance sat back on her heels by the hearth, soaked through hands torn from the rope, and watched a frozen man hold his living son, and knew she would never, as long as she lived, forget the sound he had made out there in the snow. It was very late when the house went quiet again. The good quiet this time. The quiet of a child sleeping safe. Hattie was in the kitchen, wringing out the wet things, too spent to feel her own hands when Josiah came in. He did not say thank you. She understood by then that the Calder men did not have the word ready in their mouths the way other men did. They had to go and find it, and it took them time. And sometimes they brought back something else instead, something they had built rather than spoken. He stood in the doorway a while. She let him. Then he went out, not into the storm. Up. She heard it before she understood it. The scrape of the ladder being set. The creak of a man's weight on rungs that had held nothing but dust for 2 years. The groan of the loft door opening in the dark above the kitchen. She stood very still with a wet cloth in her hands and looked at the ceiling. He was in the loft. The loft he would not enter. The loft where Della's things were. The curtains, the dishes, the chair her mother had given her, hauled 1,000 miles that he had carried up there himself, the week after they pulled her from the creek and never touched again. She heard him moving up there, slow, careful. She heard something being shifted, and then she heard him come back down the ladder. awkward, one-handed, carrying something, and she stepped back from the door to let him pass and did not say a word. It was the rocking chair. Della's rocking chair. Dark wood worn smooth at the arms by a hand that would never touch it again. He carried it through the kitchen and set it by the hearth in the warm near where the boy slept. He set it down carefully, the way you set down something that matters more than you can say. He did not look at Hattie. He looked at the chair for a long moment. 2 years of dust still on it, his jaw working. "The boy," he said at last. "Rough, low. He should be rocked. When he wakes scared, a child should be rocked." "Yes," Hattie said softly. "He should. There was nothing in the house to do it with. No. Now there is." That was all. That was the whole of it. He went to the doorway. He stopped there, his back to her, a big, worn man ground down to the grain. "In the spring," he said, "the pass opens." She waited. Her heart was doing something foolish in her chest. "I know," she said. A long silence. The fire popped. The boy breathed even and deep, the most beautiful sound in the world. "I told you," Josiah said, "that you would go back where you came from." "You did." He was quiet so long she thought he would not finish it, that he had reached the edge of what he could say and run out of road. Then, "I find," he said very low to the dark beyond the door, so she would not see his face, "that I am no longer certain I meant it." And he was gone up the stairs before she could answer. Hattie Vance stood alone in the warm kitchen by a dead woman's rocking chair with a thread in her fingers she did not yet understand, and a man's grief still ringing in her ears, and a boy alive and sleeping who was not hers and had somehow become hers all the same. She sat down in the chair, gently, as if asking permission, and she rocked. The mountain held them all that winter, and a thing happens to people held together by snow. Either they come apart, or they grow into one another, like two trees on a ridge bent the same way by the same wind, until you cannot tell any more where the one stops and the other starts. Hawthorne Ridge grew the second way, slow, the way the light comes back in January, a minute at a time, so you do not notice until one evening you look up and the sun is still on the peaks at supper time, and you cannot say when that began. Hattie Vance noticed it in small things. She noticed that Josiah had started eating sitting down. Every meal now, at the head of the table. The empty chair still there beside him, pushed back, but he no longer looked at it like a wound. He looked at it like a window. She noticed that the boy laughed more, out loud. A real laugh, sudden and bright, that could fill a room. She noticed that the house, which had been a tomb, had started to smell like a house. Bread, wood smoke, the pine boughs the boy dragged in, wet wool drying by the fire. She noticed, and she did not let herself make too much of it, because she was leaving in the spring. He had told her so, and a woman who lets herself believe in a warm kitchen is a woman who has not been thrown out of enough of them. So she kept her heart where she kept everything, behind a sound door, with a bar she could drop from the inside. The trouble was, the door kept coming open. The boy did most of the prying. Toby had decided sometime in December that Hattie belonged to him. He did not ask anyone's leave. He simply began to operate as though it had always been so. He sat on the kitchen stool while she worked and gave her the news of the ranch, which was extensive and mostly concerned Captain. "Captain says it is going to snow more." "Does he?" "He can tell. In his legs. That is a very useful horse. He is the best horse." A pause. The boy frowned at the rough little carving in his fist. He is lonely, though. Hattie did not look up from the dough. Is he? A captain should have men to command. Solemn. It is hard to be the only one. And Hattie, who had been the only one her whole life, felt that go into her like a splinter, and kept her hands moving, and said only, "Yes, I expect it is." She did not know that the boy carried that same complaint in those same words to his father, out by the woodpile, in the cold. But Josiah heard it. The carving took him 3 nights. I did it after the boy was asleep by the fire with his old knife and a length of pine off the kindling pile, and he was bad at it. Clumsy, his big hands made for breaking horses and not for whittling small things. He ruined the first 2. The third came out a horse near enough, smaller than Captain, stockier, a workman-like little animal with one ear bigger than the other. He did not tell anyone. He simply set it on the bunkhouse step one frozen morning where the boy would find it. The boy found it. The sound he made could have been heard in the next territory. He came tearing into the kitchen with a horse in each fist, breathless, transfigured, holding them up to Hattie, like a man presenting the crown jewels. Captain has a lieutenant. So he does. Hattie crouched to admire it. The crooked little ear. The marks of a knife that did not know its business, but had tried, oh, it had tried. And a fine officer he is. Pa made him. The boy's eyes were enormous, as if his father had pulled the moon down out of the sky and handed it over. Pa made him. In the night. Did he? He must have. A whisper now awed at the workings of the world. While we were sleeping. And across the kitchen at the door with an armful of firewood and an expression he was trying very hard to keep flat stood Josiah Calder, caught, red to the ears under 2 days of gray stubble. Their eyes met over the boy's dark head. She did not say thank you. She had learned that he did not want it said out loud, that it embarrassed him, that he gave his love in objects and not in words, because the words had a way of breaking in his mouth. So she just looked at him, and she let him see it on her face, the whole of it, what it meant, that a man who could not speak his heart had carved it out of pine in the dark for a lonely boy. And Josiah Calder, 42 years old and gray at the temple, looked back at her. And his jaw worked, and something in his gray eyes came unmoored, and drifted and did not anchor again for a long while after. He set the wood down hard, and went back out into the cold, because it was safer out there. The youngest one was a harder country. Asa did not warm. Asa watched, 19 years old and built like a fence rail, and so full of pride and fear, that it came off him like heat off a stove. He did his work. He ate her cooking, and he gave her nothing, because giving a thing meant it could be taken, and Asa Calder had had enough taken. Hattie did not push. She had been the new thing in too many houses. She knew you did not chase a wary creature. You set the food down, and you let it come to you. It came to her in February. Over a piece of paper. She found him at the bunkhouse table one evening, a stub of pencil in his fist, a scrap of paper in front of him, his whole face screwed up like a man wrestling a steer. He shoved it under his arm when she came in. Too late. She had seen it. 3 lines, crossed out twice, the cramped, shamed, careful letters of a grown man who could barely write his own name. Asa. It is nothing. Quick. Hot. Forget you saw it. She did not forget. She set down the lamp. Who is she? Hattie said. He went scarlet. Who is who? The girl. Mild, sure. A man only fights a pencil that hard for a girl. Silence. The fire ticked. Sadie Loomis, he muttered at last to the table. Down the valley, when the pass opens. A breath. Her people can read, all of them, and I cannot, hardly. He crushed the paper in his fist. She will think I am a fool. And here is where another woman might have soothed him. Said kind, useless things. Told him it did not matter. Hattie Vance did not do useless things. She pulled out the chair across from him. She held out her hand for the crumpled paper. I was a school teacher, she said, for 6 years, before they let me go. She smoothed the scrap flat on the table. I have taught children their letters, and I have taught grown men theirs. And do you know which learned faster? He did not answer. But he did not get up either. The grown men, she said, every time, because they had a reason. She turned the pencil in her fingers, held it out to him. What is your reason, Asa? He looked at the pencil. He looked at her, and he took it. That was the whole of it. The way it had been with the boy and the wooden horse. A small thing handed across a table, and something that had been clenched shut for 19 years, easing open just a hair, just enough. She taught him by candlelight all that month. After the chores. His letters, then his words, then how to put the words in a row so they said what he meant. She did not tell the others. It was his to tell. And one night when he had finally got a clean line down with no crossings out, he sat back and looked at it, and his hard young face did something it had not done since their mother died. It smiled. Hattie, he said. If they make you go. He stopped, started again, careful the way she had taught him to choose his words. I do not think they should make you go. He scowled at the paper, furious with himself, with the size of the thing he was trying to say. That is all. It was not all. They both knew it was not all. It was a boy who had decided against every hard lesson of his life to want something again. She had to leave the bunkhouse to keep him from seeing her face. She did not sleep well those nights. She would lie in the dark with the bar on the door, and she would think about the ledger, about the numbers that grew wrong by a pattern, about a careful woman who had kept those same books in her fine hand and ended them abruptly 2 Octobers back. And one night, turning it over, the thought came to her the way her father had taught her to think. If the lie was in the books while Della kept them, if Della was the kind of woman who read a column like a face the way Hattie did, then Della would have seen it too. And a woman like that does not just see a thing, she writes it down. Where, though? Where does a careful woman hide what she knows in a small house full of men? Somewhere a grieving husband would never look. Hattie lay very still in the dark, and above her through the floor of the night she thought of the loft, the shut door, the 2 years of dust, the whole of a dead woman's life packed away in a place her husband could not bear to enter. She did not go up, not yet. It was not hers to trespass. It was his grief, and she had been raised to respect the grief of others, having so much of her own. But she had begun to wonder, and wondering, like pulling a thread, is a thing that does not stop once it starts. The thaw began in March. You could hear it before you could see it. Water, everywhere, the drip from the eaves all day long. The creek waking under its ice, talking again, a low sound that ran under everything. The snow going gray and rotten and pulling back from the south faces of the hills. And the pass, 8 miles off, beginning slow day by day to open, which meant two things. It meant Hattie Vance could leave, and it meant the world could come back up the mountain. The world came back up the mountain on a Tuesday in the shape of a man on a good horse, picking his way along the still snowy ridge above the ranch. He did not come down. He just sat his horse up there, watching, the cold sun on the brass of his saddle. Josiah saw him from the corral and went still. "Triple bar," Asa said beside him low. "That is one of Crane's men. That is Vint Shaw. I know who it is. He is just sitting there." "I know." The rider sat the ridge for the better part of an hour. Then he turned his horse and was gone. He did not have to do anything. That was the message. That was the whole message. "We can see you now. The snow let go, and we have been waiting." That night, Josiah did not eat much, and Hattie watched the old flatness come back into his eyes, the winter's thaw reversing in him, the stone closing back over. "What does he want?" she asked. Quiet. After the boy was down, Josiah was a long time answering. "The water," he said at last. "He has always wanted the water." He turned his cup in his hands. "He offered to buy this place years back. Della was alive then. We said no." The name came out easier now than it used to. Worn smooth by the winter. He does not forget a no, Hollis Crane. And the loan. His head came up, slow. "What do you know about the loan?" And here, Hattie Vance made a choice. The first of several that winter that she would weigh later in the dark and wonder at. She did not tell him. Not the whole of it. Not yet. Because she had no proof. Because he was already half closed up again. Because if she put what she suspected into the air of that kitchen, a grieving man with a temper, he kept under glass, would ride down that mountain and put it to Hollis Crane's face. And men who put things to Hollis Crane's face had a way of being found below creek crossings, with the water high and the rocks slick. So she said only, "I have seen the ledger, Josiah, Gideon's books and the ones before, the figures on that loan." She chose the words the way she had taught Asa to. Careful. "They are not right. The sum keeps growing in a way that honest interest does not grow. I think you are being cheated." He looked at her for a long moment. "Della kept the books," he said. Not quite an answer. "Yes." A pause. "She did. She was good with figures." A muscle moved in his jaw. "Better than Gideon. Better than me." He set the cup down. "She used to say the same thing. That last summer. Before." He stopped. He had walked up to the edge of something. She could see him standing at the rim of it. "She used to sit up nights over those books with her brows drawn down. And I asked her what was the matter, and she said—" He stopped again. "What did she say, Josiah?" "She said the numbers were lying to her." His voice had gone very low. "And I told her she was tired, and working too hard, and she should come to bed." He looked at his own hands, big and scarred and useless to him now. And 3 weeks later, she was dead in the creek. The fire popped. The boy breathed even and deep in the next room. And Hattie Vance felt the splinter she had been carrying all winter drive itself all the way in. The numbers were lying to her. Della had seen it too. Della had seen it, and said it out loud. And then Della had drowned in a creek she knew like her own hands. She did not say any of what she was thinking. She could not. Her mouth had gone dry as ash. But that night she did not sleep at all. She lay in the bunkhouse with the bar on the door and the thaw dripping outside. and she thought about a careful woman with her brows drawn down over a column of lying numbers 3 weeks before the cold water took her. If Della saw it, if Della was the kind of woman who saw it, then Della would not have just seen it. Della would have written it down. And now Hattie knew where. The chance came 2 days later. The boy's chest had gone tight with a winter cold, a rattle in it that scared her, and a poultice wanted clean linen. And there was old linen up there. Josiah said so himself, Gruff waving a hand at the ladder. Go on, take what you need. He was out mending the corral with Asa and would not have to watch her do it. So Hattie climbed the ladder into the cold, dim loft, where a dead woman's life was stacked under 2 years of dust. It undid her a little. She had not expected that. The curtains folded the bright calico gone gray, the dishes in their straw, a child's first shoes kept, a wedding quilt, and everywhere the small particular evidence of a woman who had lived here and loved here and been happy here, packed away by a man who could not bear to look at it and could not bear to let it go. Hattie found the linen. She also found the trunk. It was a plain trunk at the back under the eave. Della's trunk. The one she had brought up the mountain as a bride, the way Hattie had brought her carpet bag. Hattie knelt by it. She told herself she was only looking for more rags. She was not. She opened it, folded things on top, a shawl, a bundle of letters in Josiah's hand, his courting letters, the real ones, the few words he had been able to find when he was young, and not yet stone. Hattie's chest tightened at those. She did not read them, they were not hers, and underneath, at the very bottom, beneath the paper that lined the trunk where a woman hides the thing she does not want found, a book, small, bound in worn black cloth, not the ranch ledger, something private, and tucked inside its cover a thin sheaf of papers folded small and a stub of pencil as though she had been writing in it in secret and meant to come back. She never came back. Hattie's hands were not steady as she opened it. It was full of Della's hand. The same careful loops Hattie had studied all winter in the ranch books, but it was not accounts, not exactly. It was figures and notes jammed together, dense, urgent. Dates, sums, initials, HC, over and over, triple bar, and little marks beside the numbers. Della's own private shorthand, a bookkeeper's cipher she had used to keep her own council marks. Hattie could not read, not on sight, not yet, but she could read the shape of it. She could read a woman building a case, and on the last written page in letters pressed so hard the pencil had near gone through the paper, underlined twice, Della had written 4 words. He means to take it. Hattie sat back on her heels in the cold loft with the dead woman's book in her hands and the dust hanging in the thin gray light, and she understood in a single cold breath the whole of it. Della Calder had not fallen. Della Calder had found out, and Della Calder had been writing it down, and someone had made very sure she never finished, and the proof of it was in Hattie's 2 hands, half of it, the shape without the substance, the accusation without the key, because the marks that would turn suspicion into proof were in a cipher locked inside a dead woman's head. She did not know yet how to read it, but she knew now that she had to. And she knew one thing more, kneeling there with her heart going like a hammer. She knew she could not tell Josiah. Not yet. Not until she could prove it. Because the day Josiah Calder learned his wife was murdered was the day he would die trying to avenge her. So she took the book. God forgive her, she took it. She wrapped it in the clean linen with the rags, and she carried it down the ladder, hidden against her chest. And she hid it in the bunkhouse, under the loose board by the stove, where she put the only thing she had ever owned that she could not afford to lose, a dead woman's truth. And she went on cooking supper, as though her whole world had not just tipped on its edge. The raid came 3 nights after that, in the dark of the moon. Hattie woke to it. A sound that did not belong. Not the wind, not the creek. A sharp twang far off carried thin on the cold air, and then another, and under it, a low confusion of sound. She knew in her bones before her mind caught up. Cattle, moving, frightened, bawling in the dark. She was at the window with the lamp unlit before she had decided to move. Out across the white pasture by starlight she could see them. 2 riders, maybe 3, down at the drift fence on the lower meadow, where the little herd was wintered close, and the fence was down. They had cut it, clean, and they were behind the cattle now, hazing them low and fast, driving them off through the gap and down toward the gulch that ran off Triple Bar Way. She had the main house door pounding under her fist in seconds. Josiah! Josiah, the cattle! They are running off the cattle. He came awake the way mountain men come awake, all at once and already reaching for his boots. Asa behind him, half-dressed hair every way. How many? Josiah said, pulling his coat. 2, maybe 3. The lower fence is cut. And Josiah Calder said a word she had not heard him say in front of the boy. And then he and Asa were out into the freezing dark, saddling in the starlight. Fast no lamps, because a lamp out there was a target. Stay with the boy, Josiah said to her, swinging up. Bar the door, whatever you hear. Be careful. It came out of her before she could stop it. Josiah, be careful. He looked down at her 1/2 a second. Something crossed his face in the dark. I have got a reason to be now, he said, and they were gone. She did not bar the door. She stood in it with the boy's shotgun she did not know how to use, and watched the dark swallow them and listen to the night. What followed, she pieced together after from Asa, who could not stop telling it, and from Josiah, who would not. They ran the rustlers in the dark. 2 Triple Bar men that was all sent up quiet to bleed the herd, because a herd too small to graze cannot pay a note in the spring, and Crane wanted the Calders poor as well as cornered. Josiah and Asa caught them in the mouth of the gulch with maybe 20 head bunched, and balking. There were words shouted across the dark. There was a shot fired wide meant to scare and not to hit the way men shoot when they have come to steal and not to kill. And the cattle already half mad broke, and in the breaking, in the churning dark, Asa's horse went down. It put a foot in a snow-hidden badger hole at the gallop and went over hard, and the boy with it, and there was a moment, one terrible moment, when Josiah Calder thought he had lost the last brother the mountain had left him. He came off his own horse running. He found Asa in the snow white and gasping. The wind knocked clean out of him. His left arm bent in a way an arm should not bend. Broken. Not killed. Broken. The rustlers were gone by then, and most of 24 head with them, scattered down the gulch into Triple Bar dark, where they would never be got back. But Josiah did not so much as look after them. He knelt in the snow over his hurt brother, and he held him, this man, who could not say a tender word, and Asa, 19 and proud and trying not to cry from the pain, heard him say it anyway. I have got you. Easy now. I have you. You are not going anywhere. They brought him in near dawn, and it was Hattie who set the arm, because she had set arms before in a school full of farm children who fell out of every tree in the county, and she did it clean and quick, while Asa bit down on a folded rag and Josiah held his shoulders, and the boy, Toby, watched solemn from the doorway with both wooden horses clutched to his chest. "You did that like you have done it before," Josiah said to her low after, when Asa was dosed and sleeping and the gray light was coming up. "I have." She was washing her hands. They were shaking now a little with it over. "Children break. It is what they do." A pause. "He will mend. 6 weeks. He is young and the break was clean." Josiah looked at the window, at the cut fence out there in the dawn, at the meadow with 24 fewer head on it than there had been at dusk. "He came up here to bleed us," he said. "Quiet. Crane. So we cannot pay. And he near killed my brother doing it." His hands closed slow into fists. "And I cannot prove a thing. 2 men in the dark. No faces. A cut fence and a hole in the snow." "No," Hattie said softly. "Not yet." He turned and looked at her. There it was again, she saw. That same thing that had passed his face when she said, "Be careful." A question he did not have the words for. A man feeling the ground shift under a thing he had thought was solid. But he was too tired and too angry and too frightened for his brother to chase it. So he let it go. He should not have. But a man can only carry so much at once. The papers came up the mountain a week later. Not from a rider on a ridge this time. Up the road, bold as Sunday. A buggy and in it a soft fat man in a town coat. Crane's lawyer out of the valley. A Mr. Pruitt with a leather case on his knees and a smile like a wet handshake. He did not get down. He read it off a paper from the buggy with Josiah standing in the yard and his brothers behind him, Asa pale with his arm in a sling and Hattie in the doorway with the boy's hand in hers. The loan was called. The full sum, due in 60 days when the grass came. And the sum he read out was monstrous, near twice the honest figure, swollen with the lying interest. Della had seen, and Hattie had found. That was bad enough. It was the next paper that stopped Hattie's heart. Because Mr. Pruitt, still smiling, drew out a second document. Heavy paper, a wax seal. And he announced in his town voice that the Triple Bar wished it known that the matter of the water was already settled, and had been these 2 years, and need not even enter into it. "Settled," Josiah said. "Flat. A deed of conveyance." The lawyer turned it so they could see. "The water rights of Briar Creek, sold to the Triple Bar, signed, witnessed, and recorded." His wet smile widened. "By your late wife, Mr. Calder. The autumn she passed. God rest her." The yard went silent. Josiah Calder looked at that paper, as though it had reached out and struck him. "Della did not sell the water." His voice came out of somewhere very deep and very cold. "She would have cut off her own hand first. And yet," Pruitt tapped the page, "her signature, witnessed by Vince Shaw and by Mr. Ephraim Dunmore." He shrugged fat and easy. "Dated the 3rd week of that September. Recorded proper down in the valley. It is all in order, I am afraid. The water is ours. The land follows the water, as land does. You may pay the note and stay on as our tenants if you like, the smile, or not. And here is the thing. Here is the thing that Hollis Crane and his wet, smiling lawyer had not reckoned on. They had not reckoned on the woman in the doorway, because Hattie Vance had spent an entire winter with Della Calder's handwriting, the ranch ledger, the private book, The 4 words pressed so hard they near tore the page. She knew that hand the way she knew her own. The way she knew the boy's cough and the creak of the 3rd stair and the particular weight of the morning light through the windows she had cleaned with her own hands. And from 10 feet away across a cold yard she could see that the signature on that deed was wrong. She had stepped forward before she knew she meant to. "May I see it?" Pruitt blinked at her. "And you are the lady of this house." She did not look at Josiah when she said it. She held out her hand. Steady now. Bone steady. The deed. "May I see it?" Something in her voice made him give it over. He should not have. He would think about that later, the fat lawyer on the long ride down. He should not have handed it to her. Hattie held it in the light, and she saw. She saw a signature that looped the wrong way at the D. A flourish under it, that Della never used, not once, not in 6 years of ledgers. She saw a hand trying to be Della's hand, and not quite knowing how. She saw the date the 3rd week of September, and she remembered because she had read it in the private book. Not a week before that, the 3rd week of September was when Della had written, "He means to take it," underlined twice, pressed near through the paper. A woman fighting him with one hand does not sell him the prize with the other. And she saw the witnesses. Vint Shaw Crane's own man, and Ephraim Dunmore, who had been driven off his land and out of the valley, and was not here to be asked. Both convenient, both beyond a question, or so they thought. It was a forgery. A clumsy, confident forgery made by men who never expected anyone with the eyes to read it to be standing in this dead-end yard at the top of the world. She wanted to scream it. She wanted to point and say it out loud. "This is false. You forged a dead woman's name, you killed her, and then you signed for her. She did not. Because she had no proof. Not yet. Only her eye and her word, a stranger's word, a bought woman's word, against a wax seal recorded in the valley. They would laugh her off the mountain, and worse, they would know she knew, and people who knew things about Hollis Crane did not keep long. So Hattie Vance did the hardest thing she did all that winter. She handed the deed back, and she said in a small, flat voice, "I see." And she stepped back into the doorway, and she said nothing more. Pruitt tucked his papers away, pleased, and turned his buggy and trundled back down the mountain. But Josiah had been watching her. Josiah had seen her face when she looked at that paper. He had seen something pass over it, like a cloud shadow over snow. "What did you see?" he said low when the buggy was gone. "On that deed. You saw something." And Hattie looked up at him. At this man she had grown into over a long winter, like 2 trees bent the same way. And she wanted more than she had ever wanted anything to tell him. "Bad penmanship," she said. "That is all. It is a poor copy of a fine hand." It was true. Every word of it was true. It was just not all of it. And Josiah Calder, who had spent 2 years not seeing what was right in front of him, looked at her a moment longer, and then let it go. He should not have let it go. But he was tired, and the note was cold, and the water was lost, and his brother's arm was in a sling, and he was a man learning all over again that the mountain takes everything in the end. The trading post was the worst of it. The human part. They had to go down once the pass was clear. They had wintered on short rations, and there was no flour, and no coffee, and no powder. And the boy needed shoes for his growing feet. So Josiah hitched the wagon, and Hattie rode down beside him with the boy between them, the first time off the mountain since October. She felt the eyes the moment they reached the valley. The trading post was full. Folks come down off their own claims for spring supplies. The porch crowded the talk loud, and it all went quiet as the Calder wagon pulled up. The particular quiet of people who have been talking about you. Because word travels in a valley, and the word was out. The Calder man, the widower up at Hawthorne Ridge, sent away back east for a wife, bought himself a woman out of a paper like ordering seed. Hattie climbed down with her chin up and her list in her hand and walked into it. And Winifred Crane was waiting. She was Hollis Crane's sister, and she had his soft, heavy face and none of his patience, a woman who wore her brother's money like a crown and dispensed his opinions like a preacher. She was at the counter with two other women, and she turned and she looked Hattie up and down slow. The thin coat, the worn boots, the careful mended hem. "So this is it," Winifred said. To the room, not to Hattie, never to Hattie. "This is what he sent away for." A little laugh. "I did hear. A mail-order creature. Out of a catalog." She turned to her friends delighted. Did they ship her by rail? Was there a tag? The women tittered, and the boy, Toby, pressed back against Hattie's skirts, not understanding the words, but understanding the cruelty in them, the way a child understands weather. Hattie felt the old heat come up the back of her neck, the schoolyard heat, the poor girl's heat. She had felt it her whole life, the look that said, "You do not belong here. You are less than you are a thing and not a person." She could have answered. She had the words. She had a tongue that could cut when she let it. She did not let it, because the boy was watching, and because a woman who answers cruelty with cruelty has only made more of it in the world. So Hattie Vance set her basket on the counter, and she looked Winifred Crane full in the face, calm as still water, and she said clear enough for the whole porch to hear, "Yes, ma'am, I came a long way, 1,000 miles." A small pause. "I found a good man, and a fine boy, and a home worth the journey." She picked up her list. "I am sorry you find that funny. I find it the best luck of my life." And she turned to the storekeep and began pleasantly to order her flour. The porch did not titter again, and Winifred Crane, who had expected to land a blow, and instead been answered, with grace went the color of a slapped cheek and gathered her skirts and left. Hattie did not see Josiah in the doorway. He had come in for the powder, and stopped his hat in his hand and heard the whole of it. The cruelty and the answer both. He did not say anything in the store, but on the long ride, home, with the boy, asleep against her shoulder, and the wagon creaking up the dark road, he said out of nowhere to the road ahead, "I found a good man." A pause. "You said that, in there." "I did." He was quiet a while. The harness jingled. "I have not been a good man," he said. "Not for a long time. I have been a tombstone with a pulse." His hands worked the reins. "But you said it like you meant it." "I did mean it." Another silence. Longer. "Why?" he said. Rough, almost angry with the wanting of the answer. "Why would you say a thing like that? About a man who told you he would put you off the mountain in the spring." And Hattie Vance looked out at the dark mountains and held a sleeping boy who was not hers and said the truest thing she had said all winter. "Because the man who told me that," she said, "is not the man who carved a lieutenant for his son in the night, or held that boy out of the cold with his own body, or knelt in the snow over his hurt brother saying, 'I have got you,' or sat down at a table he had not sat at in 2 years because a stranger asked him to. She kept her eyes on the dark. The first man is just the grief talking. I do not pay him much mind any more. A breath. I have grown rather fond of the second one. He did not answer, but somewhere in the dark, his hand left the reins, and it found hers on the wagon seat between them over the sleeping boy. Big and scarred and rough and warm. And it stayed there. The whole way up the mountain it stayed there. And neither of them said one more word, because there was nothing that needed saying. After that the days were sweet and they were short, because the deadline was coming, and they both knew it. Spring came on hard. The grass greened. The calves dropped fewer than there should have been with 24 head gone down the gulch. And the household worked from dark to save a place that the law now said was not theirs to save. And in the seams of all that work a courtship happened. The quiet kind. The kind that does not announce itself. She left a pie cooling on the sill of an evening, his favorite dried apple, and said nothing. The next morning, there were wild flowers in a tin cup by the kitchen window. The first of the spring. He had ridden out at dawn to the high meadow to find them, where they came early in the south-facing rocks, and he had brought them back and put them in water and said nothing. Pie and flowers. That was their whole conversation. As honest as anything either of them had ever said out loud. She mended his shirts without being asked. He fixed the bunkhouse roof before she had noticed it leaked. She started saving the heel of the bread for him, the part he liked. He started without a word, carrying the heavy water up from the creek before she could reach for it so her torn hands could heal. And the boy watched all of it with the shrewd eyes of the very young, and held his counsel, and reported developments to Captain and the lieutenant at length. It should have been the happiest spring of Hattie Vance's life. It was. For a little while. For about 2 weeks, until Hollis Crane sent for her. I did not come to the ranch. He was too clever for that. The note came up with a supply rider, folded, sealed, addressed. In a fine hand, too. Miss Vance. Not Mrs. Calder. Never Mrs. Because they were not married yet, and Crane knew it, and meant her to feel it. It asked her with great courtesy to call on him in the valley on a matter that concerned the welfare of the Calder family, alone, and it suggested gently that it would be a kindness to the family not to trouble the men with it. She should have shown it to Josiah. She did not. Because the note said, welfare of the Calder family, and Hattie Vance had spent her whole life learning that when something threatens the few people you have, you do not hand them the threat. You carry it yourself, out where it cannot touch them. So she told them she was riding down for thread, and she went to see the devil alone. His house was everything the valley said. Real glass, a carpet, a clock that chimed. He received her in a study lined with books he had never read, and he rose courtly and sat her in a good chair and offered her tea, which she did not take. Miss Vance. He folded his soft, heavy hands. He had a killer's face and a church-going voice, she thought. Thank you for coming. I will be direct because I think you are a direct woman. I have watched you these weeks. You are no fool. What do you want, Mr. Crane? A small smile at the bluntness. I want what I have always wanted. The water. He let that sit. And I will have it. The deed is recorded. The note is called, Come, the grass, Hawthorne Ridge is mine, by law clean as a whistle. He leaned forward. But I am not a hard man, Miss Vance. Whatever they say, I take no pleasure in seeing children put off a mountain. His eyes did not match his voice. His eyes were cold as the creek. So, I am going to offer you a kindness. One I would not offer the men, because the men are proud, and pride gets people killed in this country. Say it. I will tear up the note. Soft, reasonable, monstrous. I will let the Calders keep their house and their pride and their lives. They can graze my water as my tenants for a fair lease. They will be poorer, but they will be alive and whole and on their mountain. He sat back. On one condition. Hattie's mouth was dry. What condition? You leave. He said it gently, as you would say it to a child. You go back down the road you came up, and you do not come back. The clock ticked. Somewhere a fire crackled. Why? Hattie whispered. Because you are the reason he will fight me. Crane spread his hands, patient, certain. A grieving man with nothing left does not fight. He lies down. Josiah Calder was lying down very nicely until you came. He had lost his wife, his nerve, his will. He would have signed in a year and drifted off the mountain and lived. He shook his silver head. But now he has something, now he has you. And the boy laughs again, and the house is warm, and a man like that. His voice dropped. A man like that will die for it, Miss Vance. He will pick up a gun over that creek, and my men will put him in it the way they put. He stopped. He had walked just barely, just for a half a breath, up to the edge of the thing, the way they put. And in the silence, where the rest of that sentence should have been, Hattie. Vance heard everything. She heard a confession dressed as a warning. She heard Della Calder go into the creek. She kept her face still. It cost her everything she had. You are telling me, she said very low, that if I stay, you will kill him. I am telling you, Crane said smooth again, the edge tucked back away, that if you stay, you give him a reason to die, and if you go, you give him a reason to live. That is all I am telling you. He stood. The interview was over. Think on it. You have until the grass. Be a kindness to that family, Miss Vance. The smile. Be the answer to your own pretty speech in the store. You want to do right by them. He opened the door for her, then loved them enough to leave. She rode home in the failing light, not seeing the road, because the worst of it, the cruelest part, the part that turned in her like a knife the whole long climb home, the worst of it was that it might be true. She was the reason he would fight. She knew it was so. She had felt his hand go warm over hers on the wagon seat and known with joy and terror both that she had given a man who wanted to die a reason to want to live. And a man with a reason to live is a man who will not lie down. And Hollis Crane killed the people who would not lie down. He had killed Della for it. He was telling her in his church-going voice that he would kill Josiah for it too. And the only thing standing between Josiah Calder and the creek was her leaving. She did not sleep that night either. She lay in the bunkhouse with the bar on the door and Della's stolen book under the floor, and she did the sum over and over, the way her father had taught her, the way she could not stop doing. If she stayed, he might die. If she left, he would live. It was the simplest arithmetic she had ever done, and it gave her an answer she could not bear. But there was a second sum, underneath. One she did not let herself look at full in the face, not yet, because it was too large and too frightening and too full of hope. Because she had Della's book, and a deed she knew to be forged, and Crane had nearly said it out loud the way they put. He had nearly handed it to her across his own desk. And somewhere, down out of this corrupt valley, in a town that Crane did not own, there were such things as United States Marshals and circuit judges, men whose courts a cattle king could not buy. If she left, if she rode down that mountain and did not stop at the bottom and did not look back, she might not be leaving him to live as a beaten tenant. She might be riding for the only help on earth that could break Hollis Crane and clear Della's name and save Hawthorne Ridge entire. She might be leaving to save him in a way he would never understand. Not until it was done. But she could not tell him. That was the trap. That was the whole cruelty of it. The moment she breathed one word, hidden, book-forged deed murder, Josiah Calder would not let her ride for any marshal. He would take a gun down off the wall and ride for Hollis Crane. And he would die. The way Della died. So she would have to leave him in silence. She would have to let him think the worst. She would have to let the best man she had ever known believe that she was leaving him. Like everyone left him. Like he had told her that first day she would be made to go. She would have to become the thing he feared most in the world, and let it break his heart to save his life. There was only one soul on that mountain she could trust with it. She went to Gideon that night, in the barn by lamplight where he was doctoring Asa's horse, and she told him almost all of it. The ledger, the private book, the forged deed, the thing Crane had near said out loud across his own desk. Gideon had gone white, and then he had gone very still, and then he had said the truest thing. Josiah will die. Gideon said, if he learns this from us, he will ride down there tonight. Yes. So we do not tell him. No. We let him think. Gideon's voice cracked. We let him think you left him. Yes. And it cost her everything to say it. We let him think the one thing that will break his heart. To keep him alive long enough for the law to do what guns cannot. She gripped the younger brother's arm. Can you carry that, Gideon? Can you look at your brother's face and carry it? And Gideon Calder, who had spent a year carrying a lie because he loved his brother too much to watch him die, set his jaw and said, I carried the letters. I can carry this. A breath. I will drive you down myself, Thursday. And God forgive us both. She began to pack that night, in the dark, quietly. She did not hear the door. But Josiah did not sleep well either anymore, and he had seen the lamp burning late in the bunkhouse window, and he had come across the dark yard in his stocking feet to ask her simply if she was all right. And the door was not barred, and he pushed it open, and he saw the carpet bag on the bed. Open, her few things folded into it, the thin coat laid out for traveling. He stood in the doorway. She turned, the lamp between them, and she saw his face change. She saw it go from a man come to ask after a woman he was learning to love, to a man who has just understood in one cold instant that she is leaving him. Josiah, her voice broke on it. It is not. You are packing. Flat. Dead. The winter coming back into him all at once, the thaw reversing in a single breath, the stone closing over for good. The pass is open, and you are packing. Please, let me. No. He held up a hand, and it was shaking. This big, steady man, his hand was shaking. No. You do not have to make a speech. I have heard it before. A terrible quiet laugh. I am a man people leave, Miss Vance, my wife, my hands, everyone. The mountain teaches you. I forgot the lesson for a winter. His jaw worked. His eyes were bright and awful. I let myself forget it. That is my fault, not yours. It is not what you think. She was crying now and she could not stop. I swear to you before God, it is not what you think. Then what is it? Raw, pleading almost underneath the stone. Tell me. Look at me and tell me you are not leaving. And she opened her mouth, and the truth was right there. Della's book, the forged name, the marshal, the whole of it rising up to save her, to save them. And she shut her mouth on it, because to say it was to kill him. I cannot, she whispered. I cannot tell you. You have to trust me. Please, just this once. Trust me and let me go, and do not ask why. It was the cruelest thing she could have said. She knew it as it left her mouth. Trust me, said the woman packing her bag in the dark. Trust me, and let me leave you, and ask no questions. It was exactly what Della would have said if Della had wanted to spare him, and exactly what no man who had been left as many times as Josiah Calder could ever bear to hear. He looked at her for a long moment, and then the last of the warmth went out of his gray eyes, and the tombstone came down. Then go, he said. Quiet. Final. The wagon leaves for the valley Thursday. Gideon will drive you to it. He stepped back out into the dark. I will tell the boy you had to go home. Children believe things like that. His voice did not break. That was the worst of it. It did not break at all. He will cry for a few nights, and then he will forget you. The way you forget a warm spell when the cold comes back. Josiah. Good night, Miss Vance. And he was gone. Across the dark yard, into the cold house. And she heard the door shut behind him. Soft, final, the sound of a man sealing himself back into the tomb he had only just begun to climb out of. Hattie Vance sat down on the edge of the bed, beside her open bag, and she put her face in her two torn hands. And in the dead woman's book beneath the floor lay the truth that could have saved it all, locked in a cipher she could not yet read. And 3 days off there was a wagon to the valley, and beyond the valley a marshal, and between her and him now there was a closed door and a heartbreak she had built on purpose with her own 2 hands. And out in the dark, the creek ran on, talking, the way it had been talking the morning it took Della, the way it would be talking, patient cold, when the grass came, and Hollis Crane rode up the mountain to collect what he believed was his. 3 days, that was all she had. To leave the man she loved in silence, to reach a stranger with a star on his chest, and to come back up this mountain with the law at her back, before a cattle king could put one more Calder in the cold water. If she made it, if anyone would believe a bought woman with a dead wife's secret, and no proof at all, she was not leaving him. Understand that first, because he did not. She rode down the mountain that Thursday with her chin up and her heart in pieces, and the whole way down she let the worst man in her believe what the boy at the gate believed, and what Josiah believed, and what the valley would soon enough believe. That a bought woman had taken her wages and gone. It was a lie. It was the bravest lie of her life, because folded against her chest, wrapped in clean linen under the thin coat, was a dead woman's book. And in her head, turning and turning like a millstone, was a cattle king's voice, saying the way they put. And ahead of her, somewhere down out of this valley that Hollis Crane owned, Bone and Gristle was a town he did not own. And in that town, if God was kind and the circuit was running, a man with a star. She was not running from Josiah Calder. She was running for him, hard as her legs and a tired mule could carry her, straight at the only thing on this earth that could break the man who had drowned his wife. She just could not tell him so. The parting at the gate near broke her where the rest had not, because Toby came out to it, in his nightshirt in the cold dawn with both wooden horses in his fists, and he did not cry, and that was the worst of it. He just looked up at her with Della's eyes. "You are coming back," he said. Not a question. She knelt down. She could not help it. She gathered him up. "You listen to me," she said fierce low into his hair. "Whatever anyone tells you, whatever it looks like, you hold on to Captain and you be brave. Can you do that for me? Can you be brave?" "Captain is always brave," Toby said. "That is his whole job." "Then you let him teach you." She held him out and looked at him hard. This boy who was not hers and was hers, and she made him a promise. She did not know if she could keep the only kind of promise worth making. "I am coming back, Toby. You tell Captain I said so. And nobody lies to Captain." She climbed up beside Gideon, and the wagon pulled out, and the boy stood at the gate and held the brave little horse up high so she could see it. His whole arm stretched up until the road bent and the trees took him from her sight. And up at the house behind a closed door, a man sat alone at a cold table and did not come out to watch her go. Gideon drove her. The two of them on the wagon seat, not speaking for the first long while, the mule picking its way along the thawing road. He was a good man, Gideon, gentle and ink-stained and sick with the weight of a second lie laid on top of his first. But he was steady on the seat, and he knew the road, and he would not take a gun down off the wall and ride at Hollis Crane the way his brother would. That was why it had to be him. "He will not speak to me," Gideon said at last, miles down. "When I get back, he will not say one word about it for a year. I know my brother." A pause. "And I will deserve every cold day of it. Because I started this with the letters, and now I am driving you away from him and letting him think the worst, and it is the second worst thing I have ever done, and the worst thing was the first thing, and I cannot tell which of them I will burn longer for." "You will not burn for either," Hattie said quietly. "You wrote those letters because you loved him too much to watch him die. And you are driving this wagon for the same reason. A thing done out of love is not a sin, Gideon. It is only sometimes a sorrow." He did not answer, but after a while his shoulders came down a little, and he drove on. The cipher near beat her. She worked it on the wagon seat by day, and by the firelight of cold camps by night, Della's black book open on her knees, and for 2 days it gave her nothing but heartbreak. Dates, sums, the initials HC over and over, Hollis Crane like a drum beat. And everywhere those small private marks beside the figures, Della's own shorthand, a careful woman keeping a careful secret in a language she carried in her own head, a language that had gone into the creek with her. Hattie wanted to scream, because she had it. She had the whole accusation in her 2 hands, and she could not read the proof. It was like holding a locked box that you know holds your salvation, and no key. She thought about her father, long dead, the quiet man who had kept other men's accounts for a living and taught his only girl the trade, because he had no son and saw no reason. A daughter could not add a column straight. She heard his voice. "A good bookkeeper," Hattie never trusts a number that cannot show you where it came from. Every figure has a home. Find the home of the figure. And on the second night by a low fire, with Gideon asleep and the mountains black against the stars, she found it. The marks were not a code at all. They were directions. They were Della pointing. Each little mark beside each false triple bar charge was a page and a line, not in this book. In the other book, the ranch ledger. The honest one kept in Della's own hand, and then Gideon's, the one Hattie had studied all winter long. Della had sat up those last nights cross-referencing the lie against the truth, footnoting Crane's fraud line by line. HC charged us 40 head impounded. See page 11 line 4, where the truth says it was 6. Interest of $200. See page 9, where the lone plane says it should be 80. A water fee, a grazing fine, a penalty, each one false, each one with a little mark beside it, pointing home to the page and the line where the real figure sat and gave the lie away. Della had not just suspected. Della had proved it. And then she had hidden the proof at the bottom of her bride's trunk under the paper lining. And 3 weeks later, a careful woman who knew that water like her own hands had drowned in it. Hattie sat by the dying fire with the book in her lap and shook. Not from the cold. "Gideon!" She kicked his boot. "Gideon, wake up!" "What? What is it?" "The ranch ledger." She gripped his arm. "Tell me you brought it. Tell me you did not leave Josiah's ledger on the mountain." And Gideon, blinking, reached into his own coat and drew it out. The ranch book. Because a man who keeps the accounts does not leave them where a foreclosure can seize them. "I never go anywhere without it," he said. And Hattie Vance laughed once wild in the dark and could have kissed him. Because she had the lock. And now she had the key. And come morning, she would have a town and a star, and at long last, the truth would have a court to stand up in. The town was called Cooper's Bend, and it sat 2 days out down where the mountains let go, and the railroad came through in a county Hollis Crane's money had never quite finished buying. The circuit was running. God was kind that week, and the man with the star was a United States Marshal named Holt Bracken. Lean, gray at the temples, a face like a hatchet, and eyes that had seen every kind of liar the territory could grow. He listened to a thin, worn woman in a mended coat for the better part of an hour in the back of a land office while she laid it out. The loan, the lie in interest, the deed she swore was forged, the book of a dead woman who had found it all and footnoted it, and then turned up, drowned. I did not say much. Marshals do not. When she had finished, he turned the black book over in his hands. He looked a long time at the last written page. He means to take it, underlined twice, pressed near through the paper. "Penmanship is not proof, ma'am," Bracken said at last. "A clever lawyer eats a woman's word about a signature for breakfast." "I know it." Hattie's heart sank. "But this," he tapped the book, the cross-references, the pages, and the line. "This is not a woman's word. This is arithmetic. And arithmetic does not care who is rich." He almost smiled. Almost. A judge can follow arithmetic same as a jury can. He set the book down. "There is one thing more," Hattie said, and she made herself say it, though it frightened her. "The deed names 2 witnesses, Vint Shaw and a Mr. Ephraim Dunmore." She held the marshal's eye. I have heard it said Crane ran the Dunmores off their land in the spring of that year, months before the date on that deed." She swallowed. "If a man signed in September after he was already driven off in the spring," and Holt Bracken went very still, "then it is not penmanship any more," he said softly. "Then it is a lie a judge can hang a man's whole story on." He stood. He took his hat off the peg. "Where is the family now? The Dunmores?" "I do not know." "I do," Bracken said, "because a marshal keeps track of ruined men. They have got a hard-scrabble claim out past the bend. Half a day's ride." He set the hat on his head. "Funny thing about a man Crane robbed of everything, Mrs. Calder." He let the name stand. He had decided to believe her. He is generally just dying to testify. Up on the mountain, the man she loved was coming apart in his own quiet way. He did not weep. The Calder men did not weep. He worked. He worked from dark to dark, savage with it, mending what did not need mending, splitting more wood than 3 winters would burn, riding the fence line until the horse was lathered and the day was gone. Anything at all to keep his hands moving so the silence could not catch him. Because she had told him to trust her, and he could not. Trust was the one thing the mountain had ground out of him. His wife, his hands, his nerve, everything left in the end. He had let himself forget it for one warm winter, and he had carved a horse in the dark like a fool, and he had put his hand over a woman's hand on a wagon seat like a man with a right to want things. And then she had packed her bag, the way they all packed their bags. He told the boy she had gone home. That was the hardest hour of his life. Harder than the creek, harder than the loft. Because Toby looked up at him with Della's eyes and did not cry. That was the terrible part. He did not cry. He just got very quiet. And he held the 2 horses, Captain and the crooked little lieutenant. His pa had carved in the night one in each fist, and he said, "When is she coming back? She is not, son. She is patient, certain, the way the very young are certain. She promised. She did not promise Toby. She did." And now the small chin came up stubborn, a Calder to the bone. "She promised Captain she would stay. I heard her." He held the brave little horse up between them like evidence in a court. "She would not lie to Captain Pa. Nobody lies to Captain." And Josiah Calder, 42 years old, gray and worn, looked at his son's face and his son's wooden horse and felt the stone over his heart crack down the middle, in a way it had not cracked even out in the snow. Because the boy was right. That was the thing he could not get past, lying awake that night and the next. The boy was right. It did not fit. None of it fit. A woman did not clean a dead man's grief out of a house all winter and teach a wild boy his letters and set a hurt boy's arm and carry water so a stranger's torn hands could heal and then take her wages and walk. A woman who wanted to leave you did it cold. She did not stand in a doorway with tears running down her face, begging you to trust her. "Trust me," she had said, "and let me go, and do not ask why." He had heard those as the words of a woman making her escape. But lying in the dark on the 3rd night with the boy's certainty ringing in his ears, he heard them another way for the first time. He heard them as the words of a woman protecting something, or someone. He sat up in the dark, and on the wall where it had hung 2 years gathering dust was his rifle, and a cold thought walked up his spine. The deed, the bad penmanship, the thing that had passed over her face like a cloud shadow when she looked at that forged paper in the yard, the note cold all at once, the cut fence and his brother's broken arm. Della saying the numbers were lying to her 3 weeks before the creek. 3 weeks. He had been a fool, not because he had let himself love her, because he had let himself believe the lie she built to keep him alive. And down the mountain in the dark, Hollis. Crane had already learned that the woman had gone to Cooper's Bend, and Hollis Crane was a great many things, but slow was not one of them. A woman did not flee a man and ride 2 days to the one town with a circuit court in it. A fleeing woman went home. This one had gone to the law. Crane did not panic. Men like Crane do not panic. They calculate. He calculated that a marshal and a judge took time, that a forgery argued in a court could be tangled up for months by a good lawyer. That paper in the end was paper, but possession. Possession was 9/10 of the country up here. If the triple bar was running cattle on Hawthorne Ridge water with the deed recorded and the note in default, by the time any court untangled it, the thing would be done. A man cannot give back grass that is already eaten. He cannot unrecord a deed easy. And a homestead with no family on it burned out, the family scattered well. Who is to argue the particulars then? So, Hollis Crane decided to stop waiting for the grass. He sent Vint Shaw and 8 men up the mountain to take Hawthorne Ridge by force, before the law could ride. And he told them to be thorough. The riders came at dawn. Josiah saw them from the porch, the way he had seen the wagon come up in October, small and dark on the thawing road. Except there were 9 of them this time, and they rode in a loose, hard line, the way men ride when they have come to do a thing and not to talk about it. And the early sun caught the long guns across their saddles. He did not have time to be afraid. Asa, low, flat, already moving. Get the boy in the root cellar. Now, the trap door. Bar it from below, and do not come out for anything you hear. Do you understand me? Josiah, there are 9 of them, and 1 of you. My arm is no good for a rifle. Asa's face was white. I cannot hold the barn one-handed. You can hold a shotgun braced on a sill with 1 good arm and a prayer, Josiah said. And you will. You get the boy down, and then you take the back window, and you hold the barn. You do not show yourself. You do not fire unless they fire. And if they put me down... His voice did not change. You get the boy out the back, and you ride for Cooper's Bend, and you find her. You find Hattie. You hear me? Whatever she is doing down there. You go, and you stand with her. Asa's eyes were wet. She left Josiah. No. And Josiah Calder said it like a man laying down a thing he had carried too long. No, son, I do not believe she did. I have been a fool. Now move. The riders came into the yard, Vint Shaw out front, a lean, cruel man with a deed witness's signature and a killer's easy seat. He drew rein 20 feet off and looked at the one big man on the porch with the old rifle, and he smiled. Calder. He spread a hand, friendly, terrible. We have come to take possession. All legal. You have got papers. Say this is triple bar ground now. The smile widened. You can ride off it on your own horse, or we can carry you off it. Mr. Crane left that part to you. This is my water, Josiah said. My wife is buried by it. You will not have it. Your wife. Vint Shaw's smile flickered, just for a half a breath, the way Crane's had across his desk. Your wife had an accident, and there it was. The thing Hattie had heard. The thing Josiah had refused to hear for 2 years, said plain in his own yard by the man who had signed a dead woman's name. Your wife had an accident, said by a man who knew it was no accident at all. Something went very cold and very clear in Josiah Calder. Clearer than the creek. You were there, he said softly. The smile died on Vince Shaw's face, and he reached for his gun. I will not make the fight long. It was not long. These things never are. They are loud, and they are fast, and they are over before the heart has finished its next beat. Josiah went off the porch, and behind the water trough, as Vince Shaw fired, and the ball took a chunk of post where his head had been. And the yard came apart into noise. And from the barn the shotgun spoke twice, controlled a young man with one good arm holding his nerve and his fire, the way he had been told, and a triple-bar horse went down screaming, and a triple-bar man with it. 1 against 9. In the open. At dawn. It should not have gone the way it went. It would not have. Except for the sound that came up the mountain road at the worst moment of Hollis Crane's life. A sound that froze every hand in that yard. A sound that Vince Shaw knew and dreaded the way a wolf dreads a certain kind of horn. Hoofbeats, many of them, coming hard. And a voice big and flat and carrying a voice with a star behind it. United States Marshal. Holt Bracken came into the yard at the gallop with 6 armed deputies behind him and Gideon Calder and a thin woman in a mended coat at the rear. Every man of you, drop the iron. Now. And it was over. Just like that, the way a storm stops. Because hired men do not die for wages against the law. Vince Shaw looked at the marshal and the deputies and the leveled guns, and he let his pistol fall in the dirt, and he raised his hands, and the cruelty drained out of his face, and left only a frightened man who had just understood that the rich man he worked for could not save him from a federal rope. Josiah Calder came up from behind the trough, with his old rifle in his hands, and blood on his sleeve, where a ball had grazed it. And he stood in the wreck of his own yard, breathing hard alive, and he looked across all of it. And he saw her, at the back, on a tired mule, white-faced, whole. She had not left him. She had come back up the mountain with the law of the United States riding behind her. And for a long moment across a yard full of guns and dust and frightened men, Josiah Calder and Hattie Vance only looked at each other, and neither one said a word, because the largest things have no words big enough. Then a small voice from the root cellar, muffled, indignant, asked whether it was safe to come out now because Captain wished to see what all the noise had been about. The trial was held in Cooper's Bend, in a plank courtroom over the land office, before a circuit judge named Amos Tully, who had been hearing cases up and down that country for 30 years, and had long ago run out of patience for men who thought money was the same thing as the truth. Hollis Crane came down from his big house, with his fine coat and his wet, smiling lawyer, Pruitt, and the easy confidence of a man who has never once been told no. He was not smiling by the end, because here is the thing the people in that valley still talk about. Here is the thing that none of them saw coming, least of all Hollis Crane. It was not the marshal who brought him down. It was not Josiah Calder with his fists and his old rifle and his murdered wife. It was the woman they had called a bought thing, a mail-order creature out of a catalogue, a nobody. It was Hattie Vance, with a dead woman's book and a column of figures, and the patience of a school teacher who had been underestimated her whole life and had stopped expecting anything else and had learned in all that being looked past to see. Pruitt went first. Smooth. The note was in default. The deed was recorded. The water was triple bars, all legal. The unfortunate violence that morning, notwithstanding a simple matter of a stubborn man resisting a lawful possession. And then Judge Tully looked over his spectacles at the thin woman the defense kept calling Miss Vance and asked if she had anything to lay before the court, and Hattie Vance stood up. She did not raise her voice. She never did. She laid 2 books on the table in front of the judge, the ranch ledger, and the small black book bound in worn cloth. "This first book," she said, "is the honest account of Hawthorne Ridge, kept by Mrs. Della Calder in her own hand until she died, and by Mr. Gideon Calder after. The court can compare the hand to any letter Mrs. Calder ever wrote. It is hers." "And the second," said the judge. "The second is Mrs. Calder's private book." Hattie opened it. She kept it in secret, the last weeks of her life, because she had learned that the triple bars accounting of the loan was false, and she was building the proof. Pruitt was on his feet. "Your Honor," a grieving widow scribbles. "Sit down, Mr. Pruitt," said Judge Tully. "I will hear arithmetic before I hear you." And Hattie Vance walked the court through it, line by line, page by page, the way her dead father had taught her. Every figure has a home. Find the home of the figure. Here, she said, the triple bar charged Hawthorne Ridge for 40 head of cattle impounded. And here in the honest ledger, page 11, line 4, in Mrs. Calder's own hand, the true number. 6, not 40. Here an interest of $200 on a loan that the loan paper itself recorded in this county sets at a rate that yields 80. Here a water fee that does not exist in any law. Here a penalty charged twice. Here a fine for a thing that never happened. And beside each false charge in the dead woman's private book, a small mark, a page, a line, pointing home to the truth, to the lie laid bare against it. She turned the pages, and the room got quieter and quieter, because arithmetic does not care who is rich, and a judge could follow it same as a jury could. And the sum at the bottom, the monstrous sum the triple bar had called due, the sum that would have swallowed Hawthorne Ridge whole, dissolved before their eyes into what it truly was. Twice what was owed, built of lies. The first false dollars of it caught and footnoted by a careful woman 3 weeks before she drowned, and the same hand working the same swindle every season since. "That is the note," Hattie said, and laid her hand flat on the books. "Now, the deed. The forged deed, the water rights of Briar Creek, sold by Della Calder, signed, witnessed, recorded. Mrs. Calder did not sell this water," Hattie said. "I will not ask the court to take my word on her signature. Though I know her hand better than I know my own, I will ask the court to take arithmetic and a calendar." She looked at the judge. "This deed is dated the 3rd week of September, and it names 2 witnesses, Mr. Vint Shaw and Mr. Ephraim Dunmore." The room held its breath. "Mr. Dunmore," Hattie said, "was driven off his land and out of this valley, ruined in the spring of that year, months before this September date. He could not have witnessed a thing at Hawthorne Ridge in September, because he was long gone from this country by April." A pause. "And I am told Mr. Dunmore is in this room today." brought by the marshal, and able to say so himself. I was an old man, now broken by what Crane had done to him, but upright in the back row, and when Judge Tully called him, he stood and said in a shaking voice that Crane had driven him off his land back in the April of that year, a good 5 months before the date on the paper, and that he had never witnessed any deed in his life for Hollis Crane, and that the first time he had ever seen the paper with his name on it was this very morning, when the marshal showed it to him. A dead woman's name on a deed, signed before a witness who was already gone. It was not penmanship any more. It was a lie a judge could hang a man's whole story on. Hollis Crane sat very still in his fine coat, and for the first time in his life, perhaps a thing was being done to him that his money could not undo. But there was one more. Because justice, when it finally comes for a man like Crane, has a way of coming all at once. And the thing that finished him was not the woman. It was the man he had sent up the mountain to do his killing. Vint Shaw was held over for the Dawn shooting, and for the forgery his name was on. And Vint Shaw, sitting in a cell, looking at a federal charge and a federal rope, did the sum that frightened men always do. He weighed his own neck against his master's, and he found the way such men always find, that his own neck was the dearer of the two. He asked to speak to the marshal, and he told it, to save himself, all of it. He told how Hollis Crane had learned that Della Calder was asking questions about the accounts, how Crane had said the woman was clever, too clever. And a clever woman was worse than a clever man, because a clever woman could not be bought off or scared off. How Crane had said she goes to the creek alone of a morning, does she not? And how on a gray morning in October, Vint Shaw had followed a careful woman down to a crossing she knew like her own hands, and the water had been high and the rocks had been slick, and a strong man had not needed to do very much at all to make an accident out of a murder. He said Crane had paid him $40 for it. $40 for Della Calder, and in the plank courtroom over the land office, Josiah Calder put his face in his hands and made no sound at all, and a thin woman in a mended coat moved to his side without a word and stood there close, the way you stand by someone when the largest grief of their life is finally allowed to be true. Hollis Crane was taken in chains to the territorial seat to be tried for the murder of Della Calder and the fraud against Hawthorne Ridge and the attack upon it. The deed was struck from the record as a forgery. The note was thrown out as a swindle. The water of Briar Creek was confirmed free and clear to the Calder family, where it had always belonged, and Winifred Crane, who had laughed at a bought woman across a counter, packed her brother's fine house into wagons and left the valley, and was not laughed at on her way out, because the valley does not kick a person when they are already going. But she was watched. In a silence that said everything, the cattle king fell, and the woman they had called a nobody had felled him, with ink and patience and the truth. The mountain was green and loud with summer when they finally said the thing out loud. It was evening. The boy was down. The brothers had made themselves scarce in the way brothers do when they sense that two people need a porch to themselves. And Josiah Calder and Hattie Vance sat in the long gold light in two plain chairs by the door, with the rocking chair he had carried down from the loft sitting empty beside them, and for a while neither one of them said anything, because there was a great deal to say and no easy place to start. He started. "Those letters," he said, "to the valley, not to her." He had always found it easier to say hard things to the valley. "The ones you carried up the mountain, tied with string. Yes, I never wrote them. A long breath. You know that now. Gideon wrote every word. In my name. Behind my back. He shook his head slow. A whole year of them. A man I have known my whole life, sitting at my own table, writing love to a woman 1,000 miles off and signing my name and me too dead inside to notice. I know, Hattie said softly. I am not angry at Gideon. He did it because he loves you. I know why he did it. Josiah turned the worn arm of the rocking chair under his hand. Della's chair. He could touch it now without flinching. The winter had given him that. The winter and the woman beside him. He did it because he watched me die standing up, and he could not stand it. A pause. He was right too. God help me. He was right to do it, because it brought you. The light moved on the peaks. A bird called down by the creek that he no longer feared. But here is the thing I have got to say to you. Josiah went on, and now at last he turned. He looked at her full in the face. Gray eyes that had been ice for 2 years and were not ice now. And I am not good at it. You should know that going in. I am a man who carves things in the dark instead of saying them because the saying breaks in my mouth. You have seen that. I have, Hattie said, and I have grown rather fond of it. The man in those letters. His jaw worked. The kind one. The one who said the gentle things and asked the right questions and made you feel you said like the first kind thing anyone had written you in 3 years. He had to stop. He made himself go on. That was not me. That was Gideon dressed up in my name. And I will carry that you fell in love with words I never wrote. Josiah, let me finish, because I will not get the nerve up twice. He took her hand, the torn one, healed now over the winter under his care. I cannot give you back the man in the letters. He was never real, but I can give you the man who is. His voice dropped rough low, the most words she had ever heard him string together at once. The man who carved a lieutenant out of pine because a boy was lonely. The man who put his own body between his son and the cold water. The man who knelt in the snow over his hurt brother, and would not chase the cattle, because his brother mattered more than the herd. The man who has been sitting at a table he could not bear to sit at, for a winter because a stranger asked him to. That man is real, and that man. He stopped, the largest thing of all, standing right at the rim of it. That man does not want you to abide his silence, Josiah Calder said. Not anymore. That man wants to learn how to fill it, with you, for whatever years I have got left. Hattie Vance, who had been an orphan and a widow to her own grief and a thing nobody made room for her whole long life, looked at the worn, broken, mended man holding her healed hand in the gold light and felt the last bar she kept on the last door of her heart lift up and fall away. You posted a notice, she said. Her voice shook. Once. It said the woman who came must abide long silences. Gideon posted it. I do not care who posted it. She was crying and laughing both. I came for it. I came 1,000 miles for a man slow to speak, who had known grief, and I found you. She gripped his hand. I do not want the man in the letters, Josiah. I never wrote back to him. I wrote back to the man I imagined behind the words, and it turns out, she touched his rough jaw the way she had not let herself do all winter. It turns out he was better than the letters, quieter, and braver, and true. I will write you the rest of them myself, Josiah said. The letters. Badly. For the rest of my life. You will not write me a single one, Hattie said. "You will just stay. That is all the letter I ever wanted." And he kissed her. There, on the porch, in the gold evening light with the creek running free below them, and the mountain green and loud and alive all around. Once, gentle, a man learning late and grateful how to come back to the land of the living. And the rocking chair sat empty beside them. And it was all right that it was empty, because the woman it had belonged to had loved this mountain and these men and that boy, and had died trying to save them, and her name was clear now, and her water ran free, and the home she had built was a home again. Some kinds of grief you do not get over. You just learn to carry them gently and make room beside them for joy. They were married in the yard in July. The preacher came up from Cooper's Bend. The valley came too, the ones who were not ashamed to, and most of them came because nothing turns a valley's heart like watching the underdog win and the bully fall. They stood in the green yard between the house and the barn that Josiah had raised with his own hands. Asa stood up beside his brother, in a clean shirt, his arm out of the sling, at last holding the ring. And, beside Asa, shy and pretty and proud, stood Sadie Loomis from down the valley, because a young man had learned to write that winter and had written her a letter, in his own clean hand that said exactly what he meant, and she had read it and ridden up the mountain to say yes to a different question entirely. Gideon stood at the back, the brother who had started all of it with a lie told out of love. And when Josiah caught his eye across the yard, the older brother did not look away. He just nodded once, forgiven, more than forgiven, thanked. And Gideon Calder, who had carried that lie for a year, and the second one for a hard, cruel week, finally set them both down, and his face came apart, and he wept, the way the Calder men did not weep, which is to say at last, and without shame, and only for joy. And when the preacher came to the part where he asked whether anyone present objected to the union before God and these witnesses, a small, clear voice piped up from the front. It was Toby. He held up his 2 wooden horses, captain in one fist, the crooked little lieutenant. His pa had carved in the night in the other. "Captain says yes," he announced, to the whole yard, with great authority, and the yard laughed, and Josiah Calder laughed, a real laugh, full and deep and rusty from 2 years and more of disuse, the way a hinge is rusty that has not swung in a long winter. It surprised him the way the sunrise surprises a man who has sat so long in the dark he forgot the light was coming. It surprised everyone. Some of them had never heard it. And it rolled out of him and up into the bright summer air over the mountain, and the woman beside him heard it, and knew that the man she had crossed a continent and stood up to a cattle king for had finally come all the way home. Years passed. They do that whether we are ready or not. Briar Creek ran free down. The seasons, clear and cold and sweet, and the Triple Bar's cattle never drank a drop of it again. Hollis Crane was hanged at the territorial seat for the murder of Della Calder, and the valley spoke of it for a long time, and the lesson of it sank into that country the way water sinks into ground, that the high and the rich are not above the law, that a careful woman's arithmetic can outlast a powerful man's lies, that the truth is patient and waits and finds at last a court to stand up in. Hawthorne Ridge grew. The herd came back, and then some. The 24 head lost down the gulch. Only a memory in a few good seasons. Asa married his Sadie and built a cabin downstream and raised a house full of children who could all read, every one of them. because their father had learned late how dear a thing it was and would not let a child of his go without it. Gideon kept the books, the honest books, and never married, and was the kind of uncle that children fight to sit beside, and said, when anyone asked, that he had had his one great act of meddling in this life, and it had turned out better than he deserved, and he would not press his luck. Toby grew up tall on that mountain. He grew up a horseman, the finest in the territory, by the time he was grown, and when men asked him how he came by the gift, he would say, every time that he had started, young with a captain and a lieutenant, carved rough by a father who loved him in the dark when he could not say it in the light. He kept those 2 wooden horses his whole life. They sat on a shelf in his own house by his own fire, long after the hands that carved one, and the small fist that held them both, had grown old. And Hattie Vance, who had come up the mountain in a borrowed wagon, with 1 carpet bag and a steady chin, an orphan, a nobody, a thing the valley laughed at. Hattie Calder, who buried her last grief, and made room beside it for 30 years of joy. She lived out her long life in that house she had walked into a tomb and made a home. She had no children of her own body, but she had Toby, who was hers in every way that counts, and Asa's brood downstream, who called her grandmother, and a husband who learned slow year by year to fill the silence with words, and got good at it in the end, better than either of them ever expected. She was the lady of Hawthorne Ridge, until she was very old. And the notice. You will want to know about the notice. It hung in the trading post in Cooper's Bend for years and years, the original, the one Gideon had placed in his brother's name. Folks knew the story by then, the whole valley did, and they would point it out to strangers. Faded, curled at the edges, barely legible after a while. Rancher, 42, a widower with 1 young son. Seeks a steady wife of good character. And then the line, the one Gideon could not help putting in even while he lied. Whoever comes must abide long silences. And here is the joke of it. Here is the thing that made the old folks in that valley smile every time they told it. Josiah Calder posted a notice asking for a woman who could abide long silences. And from the day she walked up his mountain to the day they laid him down beside Della by the free-running creek, an old man full of years and surrounded by the loud, beautiful racket of a family that loved him, he never heard a silence again. He could not in the end even remember what it had sounded like, and he did not want to. So that is the tale of the winter. A stranger came up the mountain in a borrowed wagon, and changed everything. I have told it to you the way it was told to me. A grieving man, a failing ranch, a motherless boy, and a quiet woman the world looked past, who turned out to be the bravest soul on that whole mountain. Remember her when someone tells you a person is nothing, a nobody, a thing to be laughed at across a counter, because the world is full of Hattie Vances. Folks carrying more strength than their worn coats let on. Folks who see what the proud people miss. Folks who, when everything is taken and every door is shut, do not lie down but square their shoulders and do the long, patient work and win. You have probably known one. You may even be one. The proud ones never see them coming. They never do.